walk with every sip and laugh. Coffee's the fuel, martini's the craft. Conversation swirling in the cool night air. Talk the walk, we're going somewhere.
Woo! Hello. I'm going to get the applause music. Where's that? But good morning, Alan.
Good evening, Leanne. I love our jingle.
Never gets old. Never gets old. It just cracks me up. It gets funnier and funnier every time.
So
hey, it was great to see you in Vegas a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, it was a wonderful time. Really good time in Vegas, and that's what brought on this gambling sort of motif today. So if you're willing to talk about that, that would be great. What do you tell me something? Do you recall any outstanding gambles you made in your career?
A lot of them have been gambles. Yeah. So, I guess even mini pivots. One was just flying across, leaving Brisbane, leaving the city and flying to the most isolated town in Australia and giving myself 6 weeks to find a job there because I'd fallen in love with someone that lived in Broome. And so I pretty much gave it all up. I also had a job offer for a job in Bangkok, Thailand. And before I was meant to fly out, I actually thought this isn't right. And I said no. These are quite emotional decisions. What about you, Alan?
I'm just thinking Bangkok's great if you want to live in a parking lot. The traffic doesn't move. I've taken gambles. I went on my own with very little support. And I confronted clients at times. And I tried brand new things, contrarian things. But I think that, there are a dozen things that people tend to gamble with that they shouldn't, that they should avoid. If you gamble in Vegas, depending upon the game and the table, there are certain odds. So I play roulette, and it's if you bet a number, it's like 39-1 against you, but you know this. If you're playing blackjack, you have better odds. But there are some things you just shouldn't do in this profession. I think maybe we can help people with that.
Yeah, sounds good. And that is the topic of today, is like how to avoid gambling away your career. And Alan, a story I've been sharing with a couple of groups since I've been back is the $20 game that I played in Vegas. Have you heard of this?
No.
It's not blackjack. It's not baccarat. What you do is when you check into your hotel room, I found this out at doing some research. You slip a $20 bill in between your ID and your credit card. You hand it over, and it's like some unwritten law. You get a free hotel room upgrade. And I did it, and it worked.
Well, good for you. That's very nicely done.
Thank you.
If you put a 50 in there, you might have been able to get a room with Hugh Jackman or something.
Oh, I didn't think about that. I should have really upped the odds. So if you're joining us here live, let us know where you're joining us from, and have you potentially had a career gamble, and what does a career gamble look like for you? Now, Alan, you briefly shared, we shared some of the gambles we've made. What other sort of pivot highlights in your career? Is there anything else, like when you were working? Because I know that you got fired from your job, and that led to what you do today. So that was a good gamble.
Yeah, it was, but I could have gone and looked for employment in a consulting firm or gone back to private industry. But I thought, really, when you think you have no choice, the gamble isn't as bad. But I think Leanne, that there are smaller things that represent gambles that people are not aware of or don't pay enough attention to. For example, overhead kills this profession. And the gamble is taking on employees or even taking on virtual assistants. I mean, there's nothing wrong with outsourcing things to an accounting firm or to a technical firm, but somebody who's doing something for you 3 hours a day or 5 hours a week, unless you've got over a $5 million solo consultancy, you just don't need it. It's an ego thing. And that's a gamble. Another example is that you're betting the clients will meet their requirements like you will. And what you have to understand is that clients often won't meet their requirements, sometimes because they're slothful, but sometimes because something's come up. So, you can't bet everything that on Thursday, at 3 o'clock, you're going to launch something, or that a room's going to be filled with the right people. I mean, we both showed up and the other people we were expecting didn't.
Yeah, that's right. And I've even got it just talking about, and I shouldn't say slothful clients because this isn't even my story, but it's a friend of a friend who he's been paid a deposit for a big project, and he's like trying to start this project off, and they're just ghosting him, and they've already paid 50%. So I mean, it's kind of like he just wants to obviously do the work and kick it off, but he's not getting that. Now we've got Dee Dee, who we saw in Vegas a couple of weeks ago.
We
Dee
did.
Dee shared, I gambled by leaving a perfectly miserable job to become an auctioneer, cold turkey. Do you hear these stories often, Alan, of people sort of like, that's a 180 pivot, right? Leaving a job to become an auctioneer, it's something pretty exciting. What kind of return do you get when you see people taking dramatic gambles like Dee Dee did?
Well, I think taking the dramatic turn is one thing, because a lot of people are scared of that level of change. But I think the other aspect of that is that you have to commit yourself in terms of accountability and in terms of your discipline. A lot of people try to turn a hobby into a career. You can't do that. A lot of people think that they're going to sit by the phone or by the computer and they're going to get Zoom calls or phone calls. That ain't going to happen either. So if you make a kind of pivot like that, you need to prepare yourself for the marketing. And what I find is I coach people all over the world is that nobody really is skilled in marketing by going through school. You get skilled in marketing after you're out of school.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I actually remember during our first conversation, that was a big turning point for me. Was you're saying we're all in the business of marketing, like we're not in the business of consulting. And ever since then, Alan, I've definitely just shifted the identity. I'm like a marketer first, and everything else is sort of supplementary to that.
Yeah.
And it's been a powerful reframe. Dan shared here, great to have you here, Dan. Everything I contribute in an organization is a bet, an experiment that I can learn from. It's almost impossible to learn the same thing prior to engaging in an unfamiliar context. And it seems now, Alan, everyone's talking about VUCA. You talk about the new normal. Everything is uncertain.
Yeah, I talk about the new normal.
So basically everything we do is a gamble, right? Is that the right mindset to have?
Well, I think, nothing is fixed except those things that are very safe and conservative. And you don't make a lot of headway that way. So, if you want to be safe and conservative, fine. But you've got to take, controlled gambling, you might say it, prudent risk to get ahead. What Dan's point here is interesting because we are paid to help a client. And in so doing, we should learn. And when we learn, it makes us more valuable for the next client. We get a higher fee. We learn still more. And that is the progression that we need to take, not a cookie cutter approach with each client.
Yeah, and I think he mentioned like in having an iterative approach in his second comment there. And I think what you've just outlined is the difference between it is kind of like it's a fine line, a bold career move and a gamble. And you talked about a prudent risk. What are some ways, like getting fired, you had no control over that, right? That's something that happened to you and then you had to assess for next steps. When I've made internal career moves, I guess I've reduced the risk a lot by just sampling what would that role look like and taking on sort of extracurricular things in my day job to understand, like, do I actually like this? Am I good at it? Do I get energy from it? And then I take the leap.
Well, another way to reduce the risk, in addition to that, is not to catastrophize consequences. It's not the end of the world. You're not going to starve. They're not going to throw you in debtor's prison. And consequently, you need to see this as the real gamble it is, and not something that's, off the cliff, bet the family farm. It's seldom like that. And, in fact, one of the things I think is a gamble that people take that they don't realize is they believe what they're told. And so you go into a client and somebody says, what's the boss? He's a boom, boom, boom. And so now you sit and you say, okay, how can I fix this guy? Well, if the boss is smart enough to have hired you, maybe it's not the boss. And you get this, what I call schoolyard gossip building up. And you fall prey to it. And that's a big gamble. What you need is empirical evidence and observed behavior, or you're just listening to what people tell you, which often isn't near the truth.
Yeah. And then you create an echo chamber and you just, and I think, many consultants we talked about marketing earlier, they just market like everyone else and they see what other people are doing and kind of mimic them, but it's just creating a sea of vanilla as opposed to then thinking about actually what is my uniqueness? What do I really want to do? How can I add unique value? We got Joel here. Hey, Alan, big fan. If you have two revenue streams, a profitable one that's less fun and stable, and a new one that's growing not as profitable yet, but very fun, when do you know you need to go all in on the second one?
Well, You have some choices here, Joel. I mean, one is, keep this in mind. We need to pursue what we love doing that can make us money, right? And so somebody told me once at a big meeting I was holding, I figured you out. I said, well, really, let me in on it. And they said, you do what you love doing and you get paid for it. I said, oh, God, that's really clever. How did you ever suspect that, right? You must be a psychiatrist. So you have to decide, Joe, can you make the thing that's going to make you more money something you're passionate about and love? Or can you go to the thing that is making you less money, but you're passionate about, and have it develop more money? But the ideal thing here to bring these things into congruency is you should be making money to support the lifestyle to which you aspire and loving what you do every day. And the important part of that passion is that it creates resilience. And so you hit a roadblock, you hit something wrong, you bounce forward. It's not the end of the world. But if you're doing something that is doesn't make you happy, even though it's vitally important, what you've got is a daily grind. You've got a 9-to-5 job, no matter who you're working for.
Yeah, and Alan, I created a 2x2 matrix on this, mapping competency, how good you are at something, and energy, whether it fuels you or not. And I think the biggest, so when you're doing it well, clap. You know, you got your high competence, high energy. That's great. You're having a great time. I think that there is a trap. That was the other quadrant where you're highly competent at it, but it doesn't energize you. It drains you. And I think, you know, if I look at many people that I coach within organizations, they feel like they're in that trap. They've been promoted because they're really good at something, but it doesn't fuel them at all.
Yeah, I have something similar to that. I use importance and passion. And so if something is very important to do and you're passionate about it, you're going to be healthy and it's going to be great. You make a lot of money. If something is not important and you're not passionate, you know, let's not even bother. But if something, as I said before, is important, but you're not passionate, that's the daily grind. The opposite is, if you're passionate about it, it's not important, that's an addiction. And so, and so, for example, I'm addicted to Angry Birds. That's harmless. I can't get my family in trouble. I can't lose the house. Some people are addicted to alcohol or drugs or whatever. And so a lot of people follow what they are passionate about with no regard for the importance to society. And that can get people in big trouble. So, you know, that's my particular quadrant.
I'm curious, Alan, do you think some people are addicted to learning? Do you think learning can be procrastination in disguise?
I think that people are addicted to learning. And the key is, can you instantiate it? Can you make learning practical and pragmatic and applicable? But some people just pursue learning, you know, so if all you're doing is increasing your erudition and you're not making a contribution to society, you're not improving people around you, then what good does it do you? And so I've seen people go, you know, get 7 advanced degrees. I love these people on social media with 27 initials after their names, by the way. It reminds me of, you know, ants at a picnic. But I think that learning has to be applied. I define the difference between creativity and innovation is applied creativity.
Yeah, that's a really great definition, like the actual execution of something. Fantastic. Joel says, thank you so much for your perspective, sir, which is great. So thanks for being here, Joel, and everyone else. Let us know what comments or questions that you have. We talked about things that, you know, that you're passionate about in that daily grind. I remember talking to Julie Cloud. She was the head of people and culture globally for Chanel. And I actually remember where I was. I was in Paris and she said this to me. Her quote was, "A resume is a list of things you don't want to do anymore." I love that. Alan, you're constantly reinventing. What do you think about this quote? What does it mean for you?
I'm sorry. That's really funny. Well, I think that most resumes are lists of things instead of lists of results. And the problem is resumes list things that you've done and you don't want to do anymore. I mean, that's a brilliant way to put it. But if your resume, just like a job description, were really about results, it would look very different. Because the results you want to achieve, by definition, is something you must be passionate about. And so that's an exciting resume. But right now, people are writing resumes not to display what they love to do, but to try to get a job. And that's different. And, you know, we just had this, you might have heard, we had a minor election here in America. And
just a minor one.
Yeah. And one of the things that intrigues me psychologically for a long time is that the behaviors you need to successfully get elected are not the behaviors that are the same to govern effectively. Now, sometimes a person will have both, but sometimes they'll just have one or the other. And so the same thing here. You have to have a results orientation and love what you're doing.
Yeah. And you've also said this in the context of consulting and marketing, is that the skills required to win work, which are quite diagnostic, are different to when you actually get the job, which is when you turn into prescriptive mode.
That's
Did
right.
you say that, or have I just made that up?
No, I did say that.
You've said
Because
Yeah.
You need to be prescriptive because you're the expert and you want to tell what happens, what needs to happen. But in marketing, you want to be diagnostic to help give the buyer an idea of why you're needed and what's to be gained and what the ROI will be. If you're prescriptive at the outset, they're going to feel you're aloof and you're arrogant. You don't even know our business yet. But after you get in there, if you're diagnostic and not prescriptive, people are going to try to form consensus about what's going on. That's the last thing you want.
Yeah, exactly. And that can really sort of extend projects and well, you lose momentum as well. I've got a question for you. Alan, you do a lot of things outside of what you directly do as a consultant and as a coach and a thought leader, author, all of the things. Like, you have your hobby trains, you love to go to Broadway shows. And I was working with a group of just dynamic leaders yesterday. We were talking about career ownership. And I shared this quote. And now these women are their horsepower of this business. They are super high achievers. And I shared this quote: work harder on yourself than you do on your job. And we had a really great conversation around it, because a lot of the time it's like, well, I'm doing everything about the job, but they're not thinking about external networks. They're not thinking around other ways to upskill. What do you say to that?
Well, I know Jim Rohn. I'm not quite sure what he means by this, but I'll tell you this. The question I ask high achievers is, who do you want to be next year? And 9 times out of 10, the person will tell me what they want to be doing. And I'll have to say, it's not what I asked you. Who do you want to be? And then they have to really stop and think. And I think that's the key question for entrepreneurs and high achievers and people with a lot of motive power and so forth. They have to say, who do I want to be in a year? If you own a business, you could say, what do I want my company to be? But that's strategy. For yourself,
Yeah.
Who do you want to be? How do you want people to regard you? What are your contributions? And what you do has to support that, not the other way around. So if that's what Jim means by this, then I'm all for it.
So how would I answer that? Like, if I'm thinking a year out, would I say I want to be the author of a second book? I want to be a prolific keynote speaker. Is that how I would answer that question, Alan?
No, I think you're thinking too small there. I think those are tasks.
Oh,
those are tasks. I think what you want to say to yourself is, I want to be the recognized expert or icon or leader in leadership development for turbulent times. I want to be the go-to woman for people who are looking to lead with hybrid and diverse workforces. So I think you have to think in those dimensions.
Yeah, I think I've been doing it wrong this whole time, but I love that. That's great. As I look to 2025,
what you said is too easy on yourself. I mean, you could write a book, you become a keynote speaker. That's not difficult.
This is why we have people like you around, just to snap us out of that.
See, I want to be someone who helps people like Leanne. See, that's who I am.
Oh, look, you've been doing that the last 5 years, so you can think bigger, Alan. We got Rodrigo here. Hey, great to see you, Rodrigo. You're based in London. Rodrigo asks, how do you keep yourself relevant and one step ahead of your clients?
Well, Rodrigo, good to see you. We got a worldwide audience here. I love that. You don't want to keep yourself one step ahead of your clients. You want to keep yourself about 12 or 14 steps ahead of your clients. You want to be so unique and so special that they can't compare you to anyone else, that you're not a commodity. So first of all, I'd say, think a little bigger than that. The second thing I'd say to you is this. What is today? I guess on Monday, I'm doing something on contrarianism. I'm doing a Zoom workshop on contrarianism. And the thing about being contrarian is that you have to look at things completely differently. And so you have to look at what's going on and think of a completely different way to do it. People were content with taxis until Uber came along. It doesn't have to be brand new. We always had airplanes, we always had mail, but Fred Smith said, we'll get it there the next day with FedEx by delivering it through Memphis. We're going to have a hub in Memphis. So you have to look at things that differently. And the metric is, a client or a prospect says to you, my God, we've never looked at it that way, then you're in. Fees don't matter. You're in.
Yeah.
And so that's how you keep yourself relevant. And to do that, you got to be widely read. I'm seeing a lot of people say, I'm on a news diet. I'm not going to listen to the news anymore. I've got news for you. And that is, unless you know what your clients and prospects are talking about, you're irrelevant. You need to know what they're reading, what they're hearing, what they're thinking. And then you can be conversant enough to influence them.
I love that. That's like the ultimate soundbite. If you're not a news diet, I have news for you. I love that. That made me laugh. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely about staying relevant. And I love that you're actually telling us it's not about being one step ahead. You've got to be 14 or 15 feet ahead. Yeah, that's freaking awesome. Joel says, it's taking the time to write a book related to your career expertise a gamble, in your opinion? I would say no, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. How would you frame writing a book? How to go about it while consulting in parallel?
Well, I've written 50-something books. If you throw in the newer editions and the 15 languages, there's 70-something. I advise everyone to write books, plural. Get your IP out there. Nobody's going to steal it. Nobody can do it as well as you can. Get your IP out there. And I would say to you, it's not a gamble to write a book at all, but get a commercially published book. So an ebook is fine, and booklets are fine. But if a major book, you want a commercially published book, it's not a gamble. And you want it with a publisher. So you write a book proposal. So you'll know whether an agent or a publisher will take it. A third party will invest in you and give you credibility. And there are processes to write a book. I run something called a book sprint. In 90 days, you create a book proposal. We have an 80% of success rate in placing the books. So there's a process for doing it that we don't have time to do here. But basically, the publisher gives us 6 months normally to write a book. I promise it in 4 and I write it in 2. And I do that while I'm following the hobbies that Leanne talked about, while I'm coaching people all over the world, while my wife and I are traveling and so forth. It really isn't difficult if you get yourself out of your own way.
Yeah, and I guess before meeting you, Alan, I thought I had to take myself away to a cabin for 3 months and have this beautiful dream. The cabin, the log cabin. But I think, Joel, it's actually a superpower that you're working with a client, because that you'll be telling them stories, you'll be answering questions, and that can all go in the book. Like they work in tandem. Got so many amazing questions here today. Dan, is there a tension between being an expert and prescribing solutions and being a change agent or coach, where the result is people coming to a solution themselves? That consensus to avoid like the plague. So I guess, being a coach and asking questions versus being the expert.
I had to read this twice. This is a very, very good question, and there's an intricacy here. If you're an expert in prescribing solutions, you're not coaching, you're consulting. So you're dealing with a buyer and you're saying, do this and do that. The buyer says, it hurts when I do that. You say, stop doing that. So that's prescriptive, and that's being a coach. Now, being a consultant. Now, when you're being a coach and you want somebody to be able to do things themselves, and this is the old fish versus fishing for them, right? Teach them to fish. The difference is that you have to teach them the process. And so if I say stop doing that, that's content. But if I teach you the process of problem solving, the process of conflict avoidance, the process of negotiating, the process of decision making, those are critical thinking skills. And once I impart them to you, then you can use them continually. So that's the basic difference here. And it's important to keep those separated, because otherwise, if you do that when you should be consulting, it will take forever. And if you do the expert thing when you're coaching, you're just catching a fish for people.
Do you find, Alan, that in one call you oscillate between two modalities? Like one, like you go through coach and then you're like, okay, now it's time to be the expert. You constantly sort of switching hats?
Yeah, you have to bounce back and forth, because there are times when people will say something and you can lead them out of it. Or, a lot of people will say to me, you've said this, in fact, hey, I just answered my own problem, my own question. But there are other times when you have to say, you're wrong. That is not correct. And you have to stop it right there. And so this job, and either way here, Dan, whether you're coaching or consulting, this is about respect, not affection. I'd like you to like me, but I don't really care. What I care is that you respect me, so you listen to my advice. And you really have to tell people at times that, people have said things to me, and I would say to them, well, that's very accurate in the 1950s. But that's not where we are today.
Oh, so fun. Rodrigo says, thanks. Great to see you too. And we've got a final sort of very light question for you. Is it Wake? Hopefully, I'm pronouncing your name right. A deep question, but could you describe your purpose in life, Alan, in 90 seconds? How does that drive your goals and objectives?
Well, aside from raising a family and loving a family and, producing children and grandchildren and so on, I think my purpose in life is to help people in various places at very different levels to achieve a life that is beyond their aspirations so that they in turn can help others.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's really pithy. I wouldn't expect anything less. I feel like I could throw that question to even myself and other people, and we'd be on this live stream for another 30 minutes talking about that.
Well, it's a great subject maybe for the next one, but I think that he raises a really good question. And I think that it's important to know what your purpose is, because otherwise you just sort of drift through life.
Yeah, that's right.
I started these platforms where for just $150 or $200, you can have access to my stuff. And I did it for people who couldn't afford to be with me otherwise. But that was part of my purpose. I want to reach everybody I can.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, because it all lines in. Okay, we've got so many questions. We've only got a minute or two left. So I will, again, I can't even see you now, Alan. This is great. Megan, thanks for your question. Megan, celebrating 6 years of HR consulting. Every year has been a different experience. She's now finding herself creating solutions for clients who are moving out of a retainer or project-based work. I suspect that is normal. I'm now creating a membership for folks. What advice do you have for different offerings? Now, you're the king of different offerings.
Well,
any tips for Megan?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand this question completely. And, I don't feel very strongly about human resources, but I will say this. I think you have to understand that people learn in different modalities. Some people learn experientially, some people learn audibly, some people learn visually, some people learn kinesthetically. And so I think what you have to do is make sure that your offerings are in as many different modalities as possible to make it as easy as possible for people to learn. One of our problems with school systems, whether you're in Australia, the UK, or here, is that they're 200 years old and they don't make it easy to learn. They insist that people conform. We warehouse kids. You have to make it easy for people to learn. So if you can do that, people will flock to you.
Yeah. One of the things I've been doing that's been really effective with learning is creating private podcasts. So these are, they can listen on the go. And it's as opposed to sitting down and watching a video, and it's had a really good response. So just meeting people where they're at. And I think it's good to think about all those different modalities. We've got so many more questions, but we're going to have to, the point of Talk the Walk is keeping it short, snappy, enjoying your martini, enjoying my coffee. So we'd love you to come along to our next live stream. It's on the 27th of November, 4 p.m. Eastern time. In Australia, the 28th, 7 a.m. Eastern time. Alan, how do you think we went today?
I had a great time. I thought this was a very exciting discussion. I thought we got great questions. And, maybe we have something here. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you on the next live stream. Till next time, keep talking the walk. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you, everyone.